Okay, so we're looking now at our last presentation that is connected to the theme of militarism, protesting against the occupation, and soldiering in a way. And this presentation is based on the work by Tamar Katriel and Imrod Shavit, Speaking Out, Testimonial Rhetoric in Israeli Soldiers' Dissent, which has been published on Versus Quaderni di Studi Semiotici in 2013. So the movement Breaking the Silence, which is the subject of this presentation, starts from a photography exhibition in Tel Aviv, where some soldiers showed some of the pictures that they had taken during their service in the occupied territories. We're in 2004, we're still in the middle of actually towards the end of the second Intifada. And as you can see from the picture, here we have the exhibition, and one of these soldiers, former soldiers, explaining or commenting the pictures to a public, therefore giving testimony of his own experience, possibly in the context of one of the pictures. So from here we have the foundation of a group that is called Breaking the Silence, and this is really a testimonial project and is located somewhere in the nexus between memory activism, between activism and memory work. In this sense, it creates a collective voice out of the personal voices and images, I should add, of individual soldiers, witnesses, soldiers that act as witnesses. And what they do in this testimonial project is really to promote what we can call oppositional knowledge. And the oppositional knowledge is about the Israeli occupation in the territories, in the occupied Palestinian territories, through a very distinctive viewpoint that is that of the perpetrator turned witness. So what this group has been doing since 2004 is a sustained testimonial campaign whose goal has been and keeps being to alert the Israeli society to the reality of the occupation as experienced by those who implement it, by the soldiers who are assigned to keep it up. And what is interesting is that the testimonies that have been collected on the website and on both video testimonies and transcribed testimonies indicate, of course, that there is some sympathy and some concern for the suffering of the Palestinian, but the group's specific focus has been and keeps being on the moral price of the occupation, on the moral price that young Israeli soldiers and Israeli society more in general has paid and keeps paying by maintaining the regime of occupation. In 2013, the testimonial archival of Breaking the Silence include over 800 videotapes, taped interviews with soldier volunteers and scores of soldiers' photographs. This is an ever-expanding testimonial edifice, or so Catriel calls it, rendering or making the traces of the occupation visible in the Israeli public sphere. As one of these soldiers said, and I'm quoting by heart, so these might not be the exact words, but that's the idea. The first Intifada, the one of 87-93, the first Intifada has disappeared from the Israeli public discourse and from the Israeli public consciousness. What we're doing, says this soldier, is creating a website or creating a building of testimonies, an archive of testimonies, whereby no one will be able to say, we didn't know what was going on during the Second Intifada, or the Second Intifada can disappear from our national history because there's no testimony of what has been going on. So breaking the silence, the name breaking the silence, is really a multi-layered, has really a multi-layered set of meanings. They actually say we meant 2 dimensions of silence, but there are actually more. First of all, to break the silence is to bring back into history, if you want, or into public discourse and consciousness and awareness, the fact that something has happened and that should not be forgotten. A second meaning or a second possibility to understand this name is to break the silence or the distortion of the words that surrounds the practices of the occupation. Like, for example, what does it really mean preventive shooting, or reacting against a violent patrol, or what does it mean deterrent shooting? So these are 2 of the possible meanings of breaking the silence that surrounds the occupation. But it's also the silence that one carries with him / her as his personality changes, in being involved in the practices of the occupation. And I will report now, I will just read you a couple of quotes on Hebron, and I will explain why Hebron in a minute. So one of the testimonials, or one of the soldiers testifying, said, "In coping daily with the madness of Hebron, we couldn't remain the same people beneath our uniform. We saw our friends and ourselves slowly changing, caught in impossible situations. We decided to speak out. We decided to tell. Hebron isn't in outer space. It's 1 hour from Jerusalem. Now all you have to do is to come and see and hear and understand what's happening here." And just to give you an example of the kind of testimonies or where you can find them beyond the website, here is a book that has been compiled by Breaking the Silence entitled Our Harsh Logic, Israeli Soldiers' Testimonies from the Occupied Territories. And the second really interesting and dramatic document that I would like to direct you to is the section of the website on the Protective Edge operation in Gaza, where you have both filmed and audio testimonies, as well as this booklet entitled Protective Edge Soldiers' Testimonies from Gaza, which refer to the homonymous operation of the IDF in Gaza. But really the focus or the origins of the association come from those soldiers who served in Hebron. We have encountered the Hebron situation already in our first week when we were talking about the narratives of history, but also the different narratives of history, the Palestinian and the Israeli, but also when we were speaking about Zochrot and bringing awareness of the other and of its history into the public discourse. So here we have a more practical, if you want, aspect of the same work. And in a way, what Breaking the Silence does, for at least for a part in the active in the part relating to the activities of the association, also echoes what Combatants for Peace do, which is to lecture and to lead tours in given areas. Now, some of the tours that Breaking the Silence leads are in fact in Hebron and in the South Hebron Hills. And here we go, we come again to the question of the silence. And I'm reading this quote for you. That you can follow also while I read it. "After 2 days in Hebron, I understood that in order to survive there, I must lock all that I am, all my values and ideologies, all my feelings and thoughts in a little box, and shut up. So a high wall of silence grew between us and around us. We were silent after guard duty, silent on our leaves at home. We were silent with our girlfriends, with our cronies, with our parents. I was silent as I watched myself slowly turning into a dumb, cold rowboat. So breaking the silence has also this meaning of changing one's own, of working to change a personality that had been altered, had been changed by the very act of being and operating within the mechanism of the occupation. And while I was reading this, these words, a couple of movies came to mind that have been listed in your filmography. One that I certainly recommend is, in fact, Esther Herzog, Soldier on the Roof, which has to do with soldiers, settlers, and Palestinians, the dynamics, triangular dynamics of these three actors on the scene in Hebron. But also other two movies came to mind. The first one is Z32. Z32 by Avi Mugrabi is the story of a soldier who's finally speaking out to his girlfriend about a killing game he took part to while on duty in the West Bank. And what happens in the movie is that as he gains consciousness and as he realizes what he has been doing, the mask, the digital mask that covered his face, slowly leaves his face emerge somehow. So the digital mask finally falls at the end of the movie to reveal the traits of the face of the soldier who's regained consciousness or is now aware of what he has been doing. And the other movie that, I should mention that Z32 is the name of a folder that collects the soldier's testimony in the archive of, I believe, Breaking the Silence. If it's not Breaking the Silence, it's the other NGO for human rights called B'Tselem. The other movie that I would certainly direct you to is a movie by Shlomi Elkabetz entitled Testimony. And there, in fact, you can find other testimonies by soldiers which are acted out by professional actors, some of whom really express very well not only the silence that surrounds them, but the impossible situations in which the policy of occupation has placed many of the soldiers that are caught between the settlers on the one hand and the Palestinians on the other, and what one of the members of Breaking the Silence has called the madness of Hebron. So to go back to the question of silence, I will end by continuing with the article of Tamar Katriel and Nimrod Shavit. These witnesses, they name the occupation, and by doing so, they indicate the need, the personal but also the collective need to end it. And at the same time, they reject the narrative, the historical religious narratives of the return of the Jews to their home, understood as including the territories occupied in 1967. To highlight the ills and the ills of the occupation through personal testimonies, they also detached themselves from the Main Street state narrative that talks of the Israeli military activities in the territories as legitimized in a framework of a global war on terror. So there are different ways, again, in which the silence has spread and has permeated the life of Israeli society, but especially of those who participate to the ongoing of the occupation. So first of all, the silence, it's the silence of interpersonal settings among soldiers in the army, but also outside the army, among families and within families and friends. Two, the silence that the association is trying to break is the silence of the media. And three, it's the silence that one imposes on oneself, the self-silencing. So this is a multi-level, multi-layered silence that is also derived from the policy or from the practice of using terms that obfuscate reality and fabricate reality by only telling the partial truth. In this sense, Combatants for Peace is also, in this sense, Breaking the Silence is also connected to the other organization of refuseniks that we've seen, because there too, there is an attempt to break the silence about what is going on in the occupied territories, but also to recover a relationship that sometimes is broken because of the refusal of many of them to participate in military activities in the territories. You will remember that many of them, for example, in Yesh Gvul, already in the 80s feared the ostracism of society, that is the silence surrounding the choice, the oppositional choice that many of them have carried out since then. So I will leave you with these words. And our next week we're going to address the question of gender, and that will be women's activism, Palestinian and Israeli women activism, whether separate or joint, and one section on queer activism. So I'm looking forward to meeting you there. Bye-bye.